Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Stedman, and welcome to the Patterson Farm Master Plan Project. This is the meeting of the Lower Makefield Township Ad Hoc Property Committee meeting on July 13th. We appreciate your following this meeting and your interest in this topic. We have on our call right now 4 committee members. So that is a quorum along with consultants and our Board of Supervisor liaison, Suzanne Blundy. So, and as well as some invited stakeholders are on board as well. Let me start call the meeting to order. I'm going to share my screen, and let me get this in presentation mode. Is that visible to everyone?
Yep. Good.
So it's been an active month and in an active period. There's a lot of work to do to create a long-term master plan for this important and precious resource to our community that we call the Patterson Farm. The agenda tonight has been published. We are calling it to order, and I'll make some opening comments. We'll have the approval of the June 8th meeting minutes by our secretary, presuming that she joins us. Otherwise, I can do that. Under the project update, the first item on the agenda this evening, which is a lengthy item, an important item, is review of building conditions, the historicity and preservation philosophy, and we'll have a presentation by Doug Seller on that, supported by Bob Powers of Powers and Company. So that's going to be a big portion of our meeting. Then I together with Doug and other committee members will give a report on the first public forum. Very, very pleased with the turnout and the dialogue that was established at that public forum. We'll talk more about that when we get to that item. We have a proposal to present to the committee from ZF Creative. Ron Schmid, our chairman of Community Outreach and Engagement Subcommittee, will present that proposal for consideration on a communications plan. And then we'll talk about project process, next steps, any other business. We'll have a public comment period posted on the agenda is dial-in instructions for that public comment period. I've been told last month there was a little delay in that, so we will give you a heads up before we get to that item, and then we'll wrap up with action items, follow-up and assignments. Just in terms of some opening comments, as we discuss this process, we tried to encapsulate the process of developing this long-term master plan with this schematic, which is admittedly busy, but it starts in the northwest corner there with assessments, detailed assessments by our hired architects and engineers on land, environment, and design, the structures, their size, their age, their conditions, as well as the market conditions in this location for different potential utilizations. Those assessments have been completed. Then the discovery of alternative compatible uses. What this committee has said, and everyone has agreed from the very beginning, that we will not compromise farming on this parcel. This is an important farmland. It produces a great deal of local produce, and it's been doing that for years. In fact, I would wager there's probably never been more production off of this land ever in its 300-year farming history because of the quality of the farming that's being done. But to discover those alternative uses without compromising farming, they have to be compatible with the overall site and the community, and of course valued by the landlord, the property owner, and the community. What we're in the midst of now, and what's next is selecting some alternative compatible uses. Again, that don't compromise farming, that are compatible with the community and valued. With that, we then start to get both hard dollar figures and soft value figures associated with those uses. That is, what is a competitive market rent? If there is an alternative use for a particular building, what would the income potential of that be? Would that income support the building's long-term maintenance? It's a pretty fundamental, obvious issue. What are the hard benefits? The soft benefits, are there community returns, other benefits and considerations? So that's what we're in the midst of right now, and that's what's next. Then following that would be, again, hard dollar figures on the renovation costs. What if we have an alternative use for a building and it's going to generate a certain amount of value to the community or to the landlord? What does that cost? What is that a intelligent utilization or economic decision, or is it not? So that's then needed. And then finally, to get to recommended uses and investments, because the issue, as we've said in each one of these meetings, is not the land and farming on the land. The farmer's been extremely productive throughout his running or renting the farm. The issue are the old obsolete farm buildings, and not wanting them to fall into, well, they've fallen into disrepair, but not wanting them to continue in that state. That we want to save the site, and in order to save the site, we need to have some rational uses for those buildings. There's 15 buildings on the site, and the two that are being actively utilized, to some degree, a third are in good condition, as the assessment will state. Those that aren't being used, of course, are in very sorry condition and will be expensive to repair. So that's the overall process that the committee and this project is trying to follow, and hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Is there any comments or questions from the Zoom members here before we turn it over to Doug? Okay, hearing none. I would like to turn the meeting over to Doug Seller to review the building conditions, historicity, and the preservation philosophy. This is an important element in any decision-making process associated with a site such as this. So, Doug,
great, Dennis, I appreciate
the floor
it.
is yours.
Good, thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's been definitely an active month since really since the first public forum. Next month's going to be equally intense, and I think to sort of work with our overall schedule, we're going to be busy until October. I'm going to just hit the share screen and see what we can do here. Bear with me. Screen 2, share. I don't know if you all are starting to see a screen yet or not.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay, full screen mode. Does it look like you're seeing a screen with a consultant's update and a nice picture of Patterson Farm?
Yes.
We are.
Yes.
You're getting good at this, Doug.
Good.
You're starting to get this.
It's a little scary. I do it through the cloud, so it's complicated.
Yeah.
So let me jump right in. I've got 3 parts. I thought I'd do a quick little summary of sort of how we got and where we are. Then I'm going to jump into sort of an overview of the building assessment, which is essentially complete, with the idea that I can get these uploaded through Jim Majewski soon to the township site. You might remember I number these per the meetings when I started. So this is ad hoc 5. Last month, I shared this schedule where I suggested we follow our project schedule, building it around ad hoc meetings and an October delivery date for the supervisor's benefit to work on budgets for next year. So we're up here. If you can see my cursor at what I'm calling the second tranche, we're past analysis. We postponed this to after the public meeting, and it's a big enough topic to specifically, from my perspective, focus on historicity, and a term I like to use, which is preservation philosophy, which is sort of what are our benchmark ground rules, and develop a strategy as a group for how we're going to justify decisions going forward. I won't spend much time on this otherwise. At last month's ad hoc, I suggested a statement of observable facts, which are somewhat malleable, and they've indeed modified a little bit since last month, but essentially 4 primary use areas, which I'll show you an exhibit of. It's a reminder that each building gets assessed individually on multiple categories: use, preservation, structural repair, budget. That there's 3 classes of buildings: the houses, the barns, and the other buildings. You've had successes, you've had some failures, which are mainly characterized as it's difficult to figure out a way forward, and the idea that a comprehensive look should hopefully make that possible. And I made the statement, it's not going to be easy finding these uses, but I'm still very optimistic that we will pull it off as a group. And then I've added a number 7, which I think is important, and Dennis and I will talk about it after Bob and I present, hoping primarily maybe it's Dennis and this committee's responses to what you felt about the public input. But the idea that we have sought it, we welcome it, and we're going to integrate it into the design and the recommendations, and we're just at that point now. This is kind of the summary document of where we were at Ad Hoc 4. This is changing a bit as we learn things about the nuances of the agricultural easement.
Doug, could I
Yes.
just excuse me for one moment? Is it
Yes, sir.
possible to make the image on your screen a little larger? If not,
I don't know.
if not, carry on.
Yeah, I'm surprised it isn't large, but let me try something here, Dennis.
Oh, there you go.
Does that make it larger?
It does, but you have that
Yeah,
that space occupied on the
yes.
perimeter that
Yeah.
takes away.
So
So-
bear with me.
Full screen and swell.
I guess if I go full screen, it kind of shrinks me.
Okay.
Now, maybe
Okay.
this down here will help. There we go.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you.
everybody.
Okay.
So,
all right. Carry on. Sorry.
I won't dwell on this, but I've presented an idea that the outbuildings at Satterthwaite and the house are just distant enough, and there's enough parameters that it's a different type of building and it's closer to the road, that maybe one way to solve our analysis is to think of the house as different from these potentially. And the idea that there might be a use zone associated with a house, and the idea of spinning it along Mirror Lake could run into a problem with the easement. And this is under consideration. The second area of consideration is the validity of being able to bring this easement back up to Stony Hill, and the potential to have compost operations as they are now on the farm property in general. And I think we should just wait for the next meeting as we settle through these issues, and we'll share the facts as they develop over the next month. I'm going to shrink the size back a little bit here, Dennis, if you don't mind. So I think it's good that we see the whole page. So, okay. So I want to share what we've done since last time. You've seen snippets. I showed you we did these digital surveys. We measured them, had a structural analysis done. We essentially are building data. This is the Patterson Farmstead with its buildings, and it's got each house building rather has a number, and it's starting to get a data field developed. And this is going to keep growing as we learn more. So this comment here that these conditions are fair or that the first garage is good, these are the structural conditions. As Dennis pointed out to me, from an architectural fabric point of view, meaning siding, paint, and finishes, many things that you would consider part of a building are a degree worse. So structurally, it's pretty good news out at the site. As far as other things, there's a lot of work to be done. This is the Satterthwaite farmstead, same degree of information. And where we stand, and we have a document that's every building. I'm showing you examples of a few of the buildings just to give you a flavor. This being the equipment garage at Patterson, photos, scaled plans, scaled elevations, packing barn, packing house, sometimes referred to. Again, just going to pass you through them so you can get a sense of the character of the data we have. The main barn. The two barns have had a degree of detailed focus for the structural engineer and myself, as well as the Satterthwaite house, and less so the Janey house because it's in better condition. All of the barns really, between groundhogs and over the years, farmers have a tendency, as you can see in the right picture, to lower floors, add beams as they put in weight or move in tractors. And the lower levels tend to move around. The upper levels are pretty intact, but I really didn't think tonight I'd spend time on, although other than questions from people, on, well, what's the condition of the third column on the right corner of the Patterson barn? I can talk about it, but I wasn't going to do it as an overview tonight. Patterson barn plans.
And Doug, just if I could interrupt, for
Sure.
the benefit of the public that may be viewing, Doug's flipping through these diagrams and these data very quickly. All of these data are available on the Patterson Farm website, or will be shortly after this meeting. Will be available for people to access, look at, take their time and digest if you want to learn more. I just thought that was a footnote to added.
Absolutely. So all 15 buildings, all with the structural report, the information on it. So it's funny, this full screen mode seems to have a its own timer set with it. But just to continue, Patterson barn, Satterthwaite's house, we've studied it. Plans of all floors, elevations, its barn. Its photo on the left is the kind of dog's breakfast of the lower level. The upper level is quite handsome. You can see the township spent some money on it. It's a great space, could use a few things, but it's pretty usable as a 3-season barn. It brings up the topic of, we have 2 barns. Is one a 4-season barn and one's a 3-season? Those are some of our topics. That's all within the next month. Next month, we're talking about uses. Again, upper level Satterthwaite barn, lower its elevations. Interestingly, this stupid timer, I don't know how to override it, but the Patterson farmstead, these aren't a lot of square footages. There's 14,000 square feet net usable at Patterson, 12 at Satterthwaite. We're not talking about lots of square footage. There's which is good news if you're paying for things by the square foot. It's not a humongous undertaking, but it's a complex undertaking. This is the sort of summary page from Charlie Timby's structural report. Again, you see fair, good, fair, only one is derelict, which is Satterthwaite's corn crib, which itself can be stabilized as a shell. But these are structural conditions. Typically with heavy timber buildings, they're pretty durable, robust buildings that can keep going. Siding, windows, roofs are good because the township spent money on them. So a similar report for architectural fabric will be a little more less positive. This is an example of the 2 or 3 detailed dives that Charlie Timby did. This is the sequence as he sees it in the structural fabric at Satterthwaite. There's been discussion about did perhaps it begin back here. I think we won't know till there's detailed forensic investigations, detailed research. But looking at the fabric, it's the main portion with its bays, then this. Interesting, between 3 and 4 right there in the floor, there's a piece of concrete with like 1930 etched in it. I think this was an addition put on, which might have been very old, but who knows. And then the last addition's that. That's kind of my report. Hopefully it's not so fast. I wanted to leave time to talk about preservation because that's a discussion item. Everything I just showed you here are facts. And if it's okay with you all, unless you want to pause for questions before I turn it over to Bob Powers. Bob, if you want, I thought I'd keep the screen going for you and you can just say next. But
Okay.
should we pause for questions or comments from anybody, Dennis, before Bob takes the helm?
Yeah. Any questions from the folks on Zoom about the buildings?
Dennis, this is Joe. Doug, thank you. The dates you showed us, is there any new research informing those dates?
No, it's a very good point, Joe, and I'm glad you brought it up. A nuance of this report that I think is important to understand, due to the amount of data and information and ways we're looking at it from, landscape, et cetera, that new hard historical record research is not really in our scope. It's strategy, philosophy, logic. What I see as my scope is understanding the buildings, their potential uses, their basic costs, and giving you the drawings so you have them as a record for future renovations as you go forward. So I'm kind of consciously relying on the research that's been handed to me from other sources, with the footnote when we write a final narrative with it, Joe, that it's, that's where it came from. It's not vetted new research.
And Doug, clearly the 2 main barns are they're a kind of a separate category, or their own category, I guess I should say. And
Yes.
this picture captures it. This happens to be Satterthwaite barn. If the way the barn has been temporarily trusted up like this, temporary pillars and cement block, etc., today makes that first floor in essence unusable
Completely.
A question that I have is, with all that temporary support, does it make the second floor usable from an engineering perspective as it is? And there's a less expensive approach to say, well, it's stable enough to use the second floor for lightweight activities, and you really just can't use the first floor because it's dirt and it's populated with pillars every 6 or 8 feet.
Yes.
Or is that the case? Is it stable enough for light uses, right, on the second floor? Is that?
Well, surprisingly, barn floors have a pretty good load. Charlie Timby's report will talk about that. You couldn't put a square dance in here, assembly use at 100 pounds per square foot, but you could put pretty close to that, and without much structural work, you could get 100-pound assembly use in this floor. This floor's real problem for usage is it still has some holes and things in it. The lower floor, like you said, is a mess for use. The dirt is a real problem. It attracts rodents. I think I see looking at both barns, each floor is a separate task. Like, for instance, this upper floor of Satterthwaite, the reason I kind of lean towards it for 3 seasons is it's handsome, but it's got new siding on it that the township spent money on, and you see gaps through the boards. that is itself an aesthetic part of coming into a barn, like an old barn. It's a nice thing, but to make this building watertight, you have to deal with all that siding that was just bought. And, you know, how do we keep the water out? And so that's one reason why I lean towards this. It's a 3-season, possibly assembly use with floor fixes. And then you could light use this, leave this floor as it is. There's ways to keep rodents out of a dirt floor, button up the lower level. The issue why I went flip back to this plan, Saddest Waste in particular, this back wall has some compromises to it. And it's in part because bank barns often used to have a bank and then like a wall and a bridge, and that kept all this load off that wall. So this back wall of this particular barn is suffering from all that dirt. So to use this building safely and well, that should be dealt with. Now, could the first, second floor be used with this only minorly dealt with and monitored, Dennis? I think it could be. But the short answer is I see each building, we look at the lower and the upper levels independently. And just, I'm going to go back, if you don't mind, on this subject. The upper Patterson barn, what's intriguing about this barn is it has the old fabric wood. And it would be nice, I think, ultimately, potentially to have a 4-season barn and a 3-season barn, because 3-season barns don't need a lot of fit out. They don't need a lot of operating costs. You know, they kind of take care of themselves. This barn, we could fit it out because it still needs the work to be done. And again, it's lower use. Both barns have high ceilings at the lower level. That's unusual. So again, this could be a whole separate use from this, but structurally, both those floors can be pretty sound without much work, is the short answer, Dennis.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't mean to take so long on that, but don't give me an opportunity. So any other questions? There's one other comment and then I'll pass it on. Jim asked if, since we're kind of, if you look at Dennis's first diagram, we got these assessment and fact gathering sections are done, and now we're moving into kind of synthesization of what we're proposing and analyzing costs and all, is that we get that first 2 tasks, as I call it, the first 2 tranches of work, get them in a final form that can be uploaded so the community can start looking at them. And that's a goal for the next week or so, to get that out to you.
Right.
And maybe, and I'm hoping that includes comments from this discussion tonight. And maybe at that, it's okay to roll into giving it to Bob.
Go for it.
Right.
Right, Bob, it's all yours.
Great. Well, thanks, Doug, and good evening, folks, and thanks for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about preservation philosophy as it relates to the Patterson farm. So over the next few slides, and I guess I'm showing my age by still calling them slides. I'd like to discuss the overall preservation philosophy for the Patterson farm, and largely focusing on the potential options for National Register of Historic Places listing. So let's start with some basic facts here. First, both of the properties and their associated lands have been determined eligible for listing to the National Register of Historic Places and are still listed as determined eligible. However, those determinations do need to be updated. This all started back in 1997 when McCormick Taylor and Associates did a determination of eligibility study at that time, and in which the determinations were granted at that point. Subsequent to that, the Heritage Conservancy in 2006 submitted a preliminary National Register nomination building on those survey forms, and submitted that nomination to the State Preservation Office in Harrisburg. And everything from the National Register goes to the state office, which is the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. And the acronym for it is the SHPO, which stands for State Historic Preservation Office. So you'll see SHPO the designation in some of this in this document. So the information goes to the SHPO, and they returned that nomination for substantial revisions. So in order to move forward with the nomination and the listing, those nominations need to be substantially rewritten. So there's a lot of work that would need to go into completing that work. So back to the nominations themselves, they did identify significance criteria as criteria A, which is the criteria that is associated with events that have made significant contributions to the broad pattern or history, and C, which is more related to architecture and their distinctive methods of construction. So I think A and C are good criteria to start with. There's a potential possibly for criteria B as well, which identifies the significance of people associated with those properties. So that's something that possibly should be looked at as well. Now, one other piece of this too is in 1979, the adjacent Edgewood Village was created as a National Register Historic District. So it is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And what's noted in that nomination is it describes the village as a service and support area for the local farms and as a meeting place for the Edgewood and Middletown Grange. So you can see the connection between the farms themselves and the village. So it's an interesting idea. Interesting to take a look at that. Next, please. So these next couple of pages, I've sort of set it up as sort of a question and answer format. And, you know, it's always interesting to ask yourself a question and see where it goes. So what I did here is look at the number of questions and see what kind of answers, and maybe these are kind of questions you might have as well. So hopefully this might answer some of the things you're looking for, but certainly I can look at other questions as well. But so question number one, what's the likelihood of getting these properties listed? I think it's actually quite high. Typically, once you receive a determination of eligibility from the state, that's sort of the hardest part of going over that hurdle. But again, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to move it beyond the determination of eligibility status. Secondly, what makes this hard, or make it recognized as a national register? Really what's important is the integration of the landscape in the buildings, not only the structure, the houses themselves, but the farm related buildings as well. So having all those pieces together is really key, would be key to any kind of nomination, and certainly is key to the significance of the overall site. Period of significance. This is something that I think is really important to sort of identify, because these buildings have evolved over the years. And you really want to, as part of a National Register nomination, you typically look at a period of significance. For instance, you say, okay, it's important from say 1840 to 1940 or whatever it might be. But within that period of significance, the structures that are built, the features that are added, those are all important to the overall building, the overall site. So it's important to identify that period of significance. You would typically do that as part of this National Register nomination. So what's the best scenario for success? Would it be for doing individual buildings? Would it be just doing buildings combined, or the buildings with the sites? Or would it be best to move forward with something potentially an extension of the existing Edgewood Village? So those are all potential options, and we can discuss them a little bit more in coming slides. Next, please. So the process of creating the plan, and what's the best way to move forward with this nomination in this regard? When would you be doing this? Clearly, earlier the better. As soon as possible is probably the best way to put it, because as I mentioned earlier, you want to define that period of significance, and because that will certainly help with the master plan and identifying potential uses for the properties. So obviously trying to get that nomination developed and approved would certainly be a good move forward. Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation are the standards that are typically used for renovation projects, and you probably use those for your HARB as well. So those would apply to any projects on these buildings if you pursue the credits, historic tax credits, which we can mention earlier, we've mentioned in the future. How how much information do you need to provide to these properties to get it listed? You don't need to go the full sort of historic structures report for designation on the National Register. You typically will get a fair amount of information from doing the research, and I think we probably can. There's a lot of information that's already been provided, but I think a nomination should provide additional information on the properties and their evolution over the years. So it is something that would be very helpful. Now it depends on how detailed information you want to go. Obviously, a historic structures report will get you a lot more information, a lot more detailed information, but do you need it at this point? Probably not. This is an important question that we've sort of raised in the last slide is, could the 2 farmsteads be added to the existing Edgewood district? They could, and it's actually a viable option. There's certainly advantages to that because then you could roll it into the jurisdictional governance of the HARB, and the historic design guidelines would apply to these buildings as well. It would help enforce the preservation standards. And what it really would do, it would provide a fuller story, as a note here in the last sentence here, the area's heritage, and combine the farming facilities with the village and how the village supported the farms and the farms supported the village. So it would actually be a natural fit, I think, in some ways for the nomination. So if you were going to be moving forward, what are the next steps for that? And what I would recommend, would typically do for our projects and for projects such as this, is try to set up a meeting with the folks at the National Register office in Harrisburg at the state office, have them come to the site, have them walk the site, have them see the buildings, have them see the relationship between the farm and the buildings of the houses and the farm buildings, as well as the existing Edgewood district. So that would be the best way to get some input from the state, and that they would clearly have some opinions as to which direction would be the most appropriate for moving forward, and which would actually be the most not only beneficial, but potentially the simplest way to proceed. Next slide. So I have these last 2 slides. I just added these and stuck those in at the last minute here. But what it is, and this will be good for the record as well, this is actually from the state office, from the State Preservation Office. And what it does, it talks about what does National Register really mean? And so it goes into detail as to what it means and what it doesn't mean. So if we go to the second page, Doug, of this. So let me just highlight a couple of the items that it discusses on the second page of that document. So what does the National Register mean? It means that it honors the historic property by recognizing its importance to the community. It encourages the preservation of the property by documenting their significance. It facilitates the state review of state or federally funded or permitted projects to determine the effects on the resources. It also provides an opportunity for the state SHPO to consult with other government agencies that will adversely affect the historic properties. And it allows the potential for federal tax credits for renovations of the properties if they rehabilitate properties according to preservation standards. And we can talk a little bit more about the specifics of what that means. Typically, would be an interesting approach because usually it's tax credits or for private entities that are undertaking the tax credits. But we have certainly been involved in many projects where nonprofits and government organizations have taken advantage of the credits as well. So we can talk a little bit more about that if you'd like to discuss it. So what does the National Register not mean? It doesn't restrict the rights of the property owner to maintain, repair, or restore the properties. It doesn't prevent a property's destruction by federal, state, local, or private development. It doesn't require property owners to follow preservation standards unless they apply for the tax benefits, or in this case, they become part of the HARB. It doesn't. It doesn't require property owners to allow public access to the property. And finally, it doesn't list individual properties if the owner objects, or if if in the case of a district, if the majority of the property owners object. So it doesn't impose it on people or folks who are objecting to it. So that's kind of a summary of what we saw in terms of the National Register opportunities here. I'm certainly happy to take any questions you might have as to what you might, what thoughts on National Register designation.
So Bob, before we do, should I show a couple of graphics that are after this that show?
Yeah, you can. Yes, that's good. Great. Yeah.
So we won't dwell on these, but if you
so
want to
this
just
is-
say what they are, Bob.
Yeah. So this is the outline of the existing Edgewood Village district, National Register district. Next slide. And this is the overlay of the village of the district and the local district. So you can see that the
So
boundaries are generally consistent, but there are some inconsistencies between the two.
Doug, with your cursor, Doug, on that, oh, there you go. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you to point out where Patterson Farm is on this.
Yeah, I think-
Well, you'll see this next slide, you'll see it as well.
Thank you.
Here we go. So this slide shows you where Patterson Farm is in green in relation to the blue district. So it actually touches on that one at that one point.
Exactly. The blue is the National Register District, and the extension is as you see there. And this is the non-easement area, and it touches along Yardley Langhorne Road. Primarily right there is where it touches. And that's really our final slide, but I think it's a good time to pause before we move on the agenda for questions and comments.
And let me also add that, I know when Doug's going to be talking about reuse of the properties, I'll still be involved in looking at what the options are there and making sure that in terms of overall preservation of the properties and conservation of the materials, that it is incorporated into their discussions.
Thanks.
So, Bob, I guess, this question, maybe Joe, you're more involved in the answer than Bob even. If the decision was made to go forward with the application for National Registry, how long would it take? A, you said there's a lot of work to be done. How long would it take to prepare that application?
Right.
And then B, how long would it take to receive an evaluate, a ruling on the application?
Yeah. So that's a good question, and it is a process, to say the least. Let me outline exactly how that process works. So if, say, you have someone from the state office, from the National Register branch of the state, come out to the site and evaluate the situation, and very often they'll make a recommendation as to what they think would be the most viable option for moving forward. If that is the case, then typically you would then either prepare the individual nominations, addressing, looking at the various comments that were made from the previous submissions, prepare all that information, or as it incorporated into a district, you would be outlining why this particular addition is valuable to the district and why it should be added to the district. So that nomination would need to move forward. You would need to submit that to the state office. Typically, once something is submitted to the state office, within 30 to 45 days of that submission, they will give you an answer as to whether or not they think this is going to move forward. So you'll know relatively quickly whether or not you're gonna be in the ballpark, whether or not you're going to have a successful outcome. So what takes a long time after that is the state may come back and provide more comments. You look at their comments, you revise the nomination accordingly, you resubmit it back to the state office. And then what they do is the next step is there is a state review board that reviews all nominations that are moving forward. Unfortunately, in Pennsylvania, that state review board only meets 3 times a year. It boggles my mind, given how you can now do virtual meetings, why they can't do more. But there are 3 in-person, typically, meetings in Harrisburg. At that meeting, they will decide whether or not they think the building, the project should move forward and should get listed. But the problem with that is that you typically have to get your nomination in good shape, sometimes 4 to 5 months before that meeting. because they have such a backlog of projects to hear at these meetings. So that's what takes a long time. So you're talking, 6-7 months at that point. Then it goes from the State Review Board to the National Park Service in Washington, D.C., and they typically take about 45 days for their final review. So you really have to figure from beginning to end, you're looking at about a year to get the project listed on the register. But you do have that initial 30 to 45 days, pretty much an assurance which direction it's going to go.
So thank you. So let's say with the application in, just to set general expectations, it'll be probably a year, give or take.
Yes.
So then the question comes, if we decided tonight, and to be clear, we're not deciding anything tonight. Joe, since your historical commission, the historical commission that you chair, has agreed to kind of take on this task of the application, what's your sense of how long that would take if you were given go, tomorrow? I mean, is that weeks? Is it several months? Is it 2 months? Just try to set some expectations.
So let me answer your question and then let me pose another question, because I think there's a more nuanced questions that gets to the benefit without going through the process. So first of all, that's probably a couple of months, right? I mean, we have been compiling the information. We have to resubmit for the determination of eligibility. And for that, what I really needed was just the pictures, which I got from the Bucks County group that was on site that did that. So, with the approval, we could actually submit within a month for the determination of eligibility. But I think we would probably need another couple of months to finish the submission. But I guess, Bob, what I would ask is like the DOA, the determination of eligibility, that it comes with its own benefits, right?
Correct.
That process should be much faster. So I guess my question is, how fast would that process be, and what benefits would we get out of that process?
Well, you have a determination of eligibility now. It would need to be updated depending upon what option you chose in terms of moving forward with the National Register designation. One thing to keep in mind is, in terms of any kind of restrictions on use of the properties, if it's National Register listed, any restrictions that are going to be imposed on the properties comes with the determination of eligibility. It does not come with the listing of the National Register. So whatever restrictions are going to come are already there. You already have whatever they're going to be doing. It's already imposed on these properties. So the determination really is the one piece that triggers the issues that potentially could come up. But there's again, privately funded projects, or you can do whatever you want. When there's a federal or state funded project, there could be a review of the impact of that work on the resource. That's it. So you can. But yeah, in terms of the determination, I think once you make that next submission, I think within again 30 to 45 days, you'll get that updated determination of eligibility from the state.
And Bob, what you're saying is, because there already is a determination, if state or federal funds were involved in renovating or repairing the buildings, there would be a restriction on what the use would be. But if it's the landowner's own funds or other sources of funding, there would not be a restriction on the use. Is that
right? There wouldn't necessarily be a restriction. They would just say, okay, we're doing X, Y, and Z. We're repairing the barn, and they would say, and they would basically be, well, there's no adverse effect on the work you're doing.
Okay.
It would just be a review process that is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's not there. I mean, anything you're going to be proposing here, I don't envision being particularly problematic from a review standpoint.
Okay.
It
Thank you.
doesn't impact the use at all, but it could impact how we do renovations.
Yeah, they're not going to dictate use. They're just going to dictate. They're just going to look at the impact.
Right. Okay.
I have a question, if you don't mind me asking one, Dennis. And that is, it's maybe for Bob and Joe. I'm visualizing at some point in October, we have sort of early investments in buildings to stabilize them and preserve them, keep rodents out, keep water out, things like that, followed by sort of medium term and long term. And my question, I guess, is if there's short term things like repairing siding or painting or, possibly putting concrete slabs where there's dirt floors or somehow addressing rodent problems. And that's in a township budget that's aiming for, just to throw out a date, next summer or something. That's before this 12-month period's gone through its cycle. How does taking early stabilization efforts, how did those efforts impact this process where we don't take a step that's the wrong step that then jeopardizes something when it finally gets approved? Do you do it at some risk and just be cautious in what you do, or do you have a comment on that?
Well, again, if it is something that's going to be funded by federal or state monies, the review would be occurring now. So we wouldn't necessarily have to be waiting the 12 months until it's actually listed.
I say.
It would be ongoing. So that is something to keep in mind, that there would be that review at this point.
I'm visualizing it's likely township funds, I would imagine, if we do things like stabilize to keep them from deteriorating more while we wait for the medium long-term renovations. Would we just prudently make decisions on what's most likely to not be a problem, or does it happen and that work becomes the basis for going forward?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And again, also, I don't think you necessarily need to wait for the National Register designation if you wanted to move forward with including this in the local district, correct?
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't know if Joe has a comment on that. If it's just an expansion of the local district, you're saying, Bob.
Right. I mean, that could be accelerated before the National Register completion, or you can wait, or I don't know timing wise how you would work there.
I mean, so first I want to come back to Doug's original questions. I think, Doug, as long as we stay in accordance with the Secretary of Interior's guidelines, in this case for preservation, I think we would be, appropriately conservative in terms of any future work that's going to be.
Yeah, I would think so too, but just thought I'd ask since I got expert capacity here in a phone call.
That's one of the restrictions they'll place on us with the use of federal or state money. But in terms of expanding the existing district, I don't know, Bob. I thought maybe you might know. I mean, they would just become contributing structures.
Correct.
Contributing structures to the new district. And
yep.
Is that the same process as a new National Register submission, or is it a different process because the district's already considered to be historic?
It's actually a much easier process and a much simpler process, and it doesn't involve. I mean, expanding a district is much simpler than creating two individual nominations. It would be simpler. It would be faster than moving forward with individual nominations, because all you have to do is show how those buildings contribute to that district.
Which the district, by definition, almost makes the statement in its existence that there is a relationship between the district and the farm.
And I just find it hard to believe that would not be something the state would want to see. I mean, just the continuity between the village and the farms is just. I mean, I think this would be pretty unique in a lot of ways. So I think they'd be very excited about that potential.
Great. So, Dennis, this dialogue is exactly what I was hoping to get to tonight when we set our schedule a few months ago. So, if there's other comments, we can keep having them, or whatever people want.
Look, I would just like to ask Steve Hines, as chair of HARB, if he sees any issues with that approach. If he's more familiar with the overlay district and things like that, that would be nice.
I'm sorry, Joe, couldn't hear you.
I was just going to ask Steve Hines, because he's chair of HARBs,
Okay.
if he saw any issues with that approach, because he's more familiar with the overlay district that was created. Steve, do you have any comments on the thought of expanding the existing district?
A lot would depend on the viewpoint of the township supervisors to begin with. I think that once a determination was made by them in particular to say, we are extending the district, that it's just a matter of making that indication known to the state. And then we would deal with the farm structures, because we would be dealing only with the actual architecture on the site. And at that point, we would, whether they have been accepted and the nomination is complete and they are on the National Register, there's certainly some things that we would do differently. But with all of the other non-contributory elements of the existing historic district, we deal with them in a manner that has been established by the local restrictions and the local guidelines.
Mhm.
So at that point, even though those are based on the Secretary of the Interior guidelines, the majority of them have a little more leeway. They're conforming with the standards that are set for, in some cases, like the shopping center, McCaffrey Shopping Center. That has long been a non-contributory element of Edgewood Village, and we deal with them as we have always, that there are standards established, and we try and maintain those standards.
Right.
I hope that's not too much of a statement for a
it's
very
helpful.
simple idea.
That's very
We
Yeah.
you know,
You
try and make
start-
it work.
You start with a statement of, does the township want to explore that? Does they want to explore that idea? And it sounds like what Bob Powers is saying, it might be the easiest way to approach National Register inclusion is by the district level rather than individual farmstead level.
Right. Right.
Okay, Dennis, so
All right.
that concludes our portion.
All
of the
right.
agenda.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This whole topic of National Registry and inclusion in the Edgewood Village District is important. So it's important that we do get a clear understanding of that. Okay, I will. If we go back to the agenda. The next agenda item is the report on the first public forum. I would like to let me bring up a report that we have on that. And bear with me.
Folks, if it's okay with you, I think I'm gonna take my leave. If you need me for anything.
I'm okay. How about the rest of the committee? Do you all think we'll be needing Bob anymore? I suspect not.
Okay. All right,
Yeah,
great.
thank
Well,
you,
thank
Bob.
you. Good to
Great,
see
Bob.
everybody.
Thanks a
Okay,
lot.
Take care.
So as everyone on the call knows, we had our first public in-person public forum on the 26th of June. I'll tell you what I said to several people. I was extremely relieved. I was concerned that we would hold a forum and there'd be 15 people there. and the smart money was saying, no, we'll probably have 50. And a couple of people said, oh, we could get up to 100. And I think in the final count, it was well over 120, or Ron, maybe you know better than I, but it was a tremendous turnout. And we really were pleased and satisfied with that. And Ron and his group did a great job of publicizing and getting the word out about that meeting. We tried to, one of the elements of that meeting, there was a lot of dialogues and notes taken, and that was very important. There were comment cards provided in the back of the room, and we scanned and tried to sort through those to try to get some learning, some kind of takeaways from that source. And what I'm showing on the screen now is an attempt to summarize what is a wide variety of comments, right? So almost by definition, it's a little bit beyond summary. We've captured literally every comment here, with the exception of we did not bother with the comments that were only looking back and commenting on past decisions. It should have been done 10 years ago. This should have, that should have. It wouldn't be. That didn't. We didn't try to include those. This project has to look at the situation that's on the ground today for whatever reason, what's the circumstance today, and what's our best path forward. So those are the only comments that would not be reflected in this document, which again will be on the Patterson Farm landing page right after this meeting. There, throughout all the discussions, there's every proposal is to keep the land in farming. There's no debate about the land being agricultural land. That's a given. It's being farmed very responsibly by local Charlene Farms. But the difficult and costly decisions are all about the buildings. So the first kind of category here of comments that we could group together was kind of overall building utilization, overall direction for the site. What is the overall direction for Patterson Farm as a site? And they really fall into two buckets: mixed use, and that could be mixed use, anything other than farming. It's art, it's museums, you name it. It's something other than farming. So the two buckets are farm use only versus a mixed use. And there's a wide variety of comments here. And just to highlight a few, and again, everyone can read them at their own pace. Here's a comment from a member: priorities, trails and access across Mirror Lake Road, community and family friendly space, farm, brewery, distillery, educational living history programs, bring young families to LMT, do not want a wedding venue. All right, these are all verbatim. That's a mixed use comment. Think small, let the farm dictate, preserve the vistas we love, make life better for the farmer. He contributes the food we consume, shop and buy locally. That we categorize as a farm use only kind of comment. And there's just a wide variety of them. Farm equipment museum and event space for weddings and parties, a mixed use. Here, number 7, leave the farm as a farm, exclamation mark. No additional uses of the land for other projects, community or otherwise. Use the existing golf course and old farmhouse and parking lots to develop wedding and party venue. No more asphalt, concrete, and parking lots. Do not expand the arts program. Categorize that as someone kind of voting for the farm use, if you will. LMT should sell some of the land, enough for the owner, enough for the buyer to recoup money spent. Still plenty of ground to accommodate this and farm and still farm. 14, it's vital to preserve the farmland and structures from local community awareness to making a field trip destinations for schools as a farm, and to offer just to be there. Economic development while retaining agriculture heritage of the buildings may be a challenge requiring compromise, but better than the loss of the structures. Potential use of the buildings, music, social events, on and on. Another comment: no more traffic, no more lights, no big parking lot. Okay, so there's a long list of comments, and they vary. AOI has a presence. Other community members groups need to be included, that they are related to farming history. The Patterson Farm Preservation Center for Ag Heritage makes sense, et cetera, et cetera. So there were 20 of these comments that fell in this broad category. And so just to try to categorize them, a high level, non-representative number. This is just comment cards. We don't, it doesn't represent the community necessarily. Of the total of 20, 30%, 6 said farm use only, 14 said mixed use. Then there was another category, farming related. Keeping it as a working farm is very important. That was obviously categorized. We need an equine vet clinic in the area, it was actually said. Education on the farming process, the types of crops grown, why, livestock education on pollinators, honeybees, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was a whole category that were art related. Like to see AOI expand, vibrant organization and asset to community. AOI can and would like to do more to contribute to history and craft of LMT. Just to skip around. AOI adds culture to a beautiful town. With big stores taking over, we need to keep and preserve what makes LMT beautiful. Priorities: art, education, art studios, galleries, active farming, no residential or retail buildings. So again, on and on. If I add up everything, all of those comments, it's 39. We still come out with about a 70-30 split. 70% of the comments of the people participating in the forum, which obviously are people that care more than average, about 70-30 split between exclusively farming versus mixed use, is obvious. A lot of comments on nature, environment, on trails. That was a, love the trails, please do this. A trail would be great to appreciate the history and nature. We recently moved to the area in a farm park with trails for walking, biking, and of course designed to allow farming to be done. Walking along a creek would be great. A lot of support for anything that's nature, access to the scenery there. A scaled back version of the trail that connected to the main sidewalk at the intersection of Mirror Lake and Yardley Road would be an improvement and still allow the community to appreciate the farm. So just a number of comments. Everyone can read these on their own. There were comments that were focused just on individual buildings or just about the structures. I'm against taking down any structures. If absolutely necessary, call Barn Company in New Jersey to dismantle and reassemble elsewhere. Sattersthwaite could be historically restored into a B&B. Sattersthwaite could be a town visitors center museum for agriculture, regional heritage. And there was a group that fall under the bucket of expense related, which I thought was very interesting. By LMT waiting so long and the cost of repair is humongous, the grounds should not be an issue. And that's what we've been saying. The grounds will not be an issue. to renovate these buildings is going to take millions of dollars, and taxpayers will end up footing the bills and upkeep going forward. I have my own farm to maintain. I don't need another one. Okay. Here's one that I thought was particularly insightful, but these, important to preserve farm buildings and excited by the idea of an agricultural center, culture center. But these are all, quote, nice ideas, close quote, without first thinking about how the seed money will be raised and how these ideas will be sustainable. I'd like to hear more about that before future discussions take place. In other words, is it going to pay back? How do we make this a worthwhile endeavor that can support itself? There were comments that fell under the general category. Thank you for doing this and for our community. Good luck, that type of things. There were specific event ideas that if structures and a facility were in place, here's an idea for an event. Hot air balloon rides or community gardens. Those are kind of specific. And then a couple non-Patterson ones, including Pennsbury High School North, go Falcons. All right. So they're all in there. They're all in there. That if you go through these carefully, I think there's early kind of top line takeaways from these suggestion cards. Just there's a couple things that are pretty obvious. The first is our community is highly interested in Patterson Farm. It's clear. I mean, to get, on an end of June rainy night, over 120 people to come out to a meeting really was inspiring. This is an important property of the community. We can, very confidently conclude that. And the status, and also the status quo is undesired. I mean, we all heard it many, many times. We can't access the farm. We want to be able to see it. We want to be able to enjoy it more. So that's a clear conclusion. It's an important property, the Lower Makefield, and that's encouraging. Two, there is a wide variation in opinions on what to do with Patterson Farm. Nobody's got the single best answer. The opinions are very diverse. So that's why this creating this master plan with a common vision is such a challenge. But it's time to do it, or we're going to lose it. So there's a wide variety of opinions. There is only one, I think, clear consensus, and that is that the land stay in agriculture, stay in farming. I didn't hear anyone, any comment in any form that countered that, and it's local, important production. 4, the suggestions supporting mixed use of the buildings, always within the context of being compatible with farming, versus the farming use only, were split about 70-30. It was clear there was more than twice as many people that were open to a mixed use scenario than there was, just farming only. And again, remember, these samples are not LMT residents only. This is the broader community, and quite frankly, we need to give a little heavier weight to the LMT residents because it's going to be most likely their dollars involved. The fifth point I think we can conclude is within the support for mixed uses, that 70% that is open to that, there's no clear consensus on what those mixed uses ought to be, except for the inclusion of art. There was no commentary, there was no suggestions other than farm only, that art would not be a part of some mixed use scenario for these buildings. But there's no consensus. We had comments of a distillery is a great idea, and we had comments of don't ever build a distillery is a horrible idea. So within mixed use, which seems to be the majority, there's no consensus, is what I would, how I would describe it. And there appears to be general support and desire for trails to access the woods, the stream, nature, with a lot of support expressed and no objections, not a single negative towards trails, like there wasn't a negative towards stop farming there. So those are some early takeaways. We really appreciate all of the effort that and time that everyone put in. It generated a lot of interest, which was the goal. We have other notes from the big sheets of paper and sign-in sheets and things, and each consultant at their desk, at their corner of expertise, if you will, had notes and made notes of the conversations that they had, and all of that is being integrated, digested, taken to heart. But this was one. This document from the suggestion cards was a quick and easy, not quick and easy, but maybe amongst the easier things to try to summarize, because they were all in one spot in more or less one format. Discussions, conversations, other observations that participants in the meeting want to point out. Most of the committee was there. Most of the consultants were there. So for anybody on the Zoom, other observations, other takeaways, that impressions that you got from the public forum? Jim, you're raising your hand. Sorry, I'm not seeing everybody at the same time.
And not a problem. I just want to say that, I was really pleased with the turnout. I always worry that there's the apathy in the community sometimes on issues. So I think we had over 120 people sign in. There were at least another 30 that were present that did not sign in, plus the consultants that were there, a few supervisors, township staff members were there. So the turnout was really good. And I think the general sense that I got from the people I spoke to is that they were very pleased overall with the presentations and the chance to have a discussion with the consultants on concerns that they had and questions that they had. So I thought it really went well.
Steve.
Yes, I would just like to offer a caveat toward the interpretation of a lot of the comments. There was, as you pointed out, quite a bit of response to the idea of having the art-related use continued. And I think that it might be more, let's say, realistic to interpret some of this in the fact that, well, the art use is there. It hasn't always been historically there. Yeah, it's right. The kind of thing where it was kind of superimposed because of a vacuum, perhaps, and it seemed like a good fit at the time. But in the actual utility of the house that is currently housing the art program, there has been certain adaptations made to that house that are, somewhat difficult to, let's say, justify if it were just a house or something else, or maybe even an office. Even then, it would have lighter utility on the floor structure, etc. And from what I understood, it recently has had a third sanding by drum sander of the floor to take off paint, etc. In other words, overall, there has been some diminution of value of the house itself because of the use. And I'm not sure that it has always been, let's say, counteracted by a positive cash flow to the township in terms of utilizing it for either that house or the rest of the farm. So the fact that we're getting positive response from the community that utilizes the artistic spaces that are there does not necessarily mean that it is compatible with the farming. And I think, as you stated from the beginning, that it's really very important to address the entire process of evaluating this, and the fact that the land has been determined scientifically to be like the best farmland in the state of Pennsylvania. So just as I said, a caveat in terms of interpretation, from my point of view as a historian, as an architect, and the fact that the Patterson House is used as a classroom without the upgrade of the structure in order to accommodate the loading factors on the floor that are, well, defined by the state code. So thanks for listening. I'm sorry to be negative.
Good comment.
Yeah, no, I think it's a solid comment, and I think there's a distinction to be made in my mind, at least, between the utilization. In this case, we're talking about, okay, it's utilized for art, and the rental agreement and the landlord tenant relationship. I believe that in a thoughtful plan, if we look at multi uses, mixed uses, leases and agreements have to be tighter and different. I think what Steve's pointing out is something that it's a complaint I've heard in the past, in terms of, we want to be sure tenants are doing things consistent with the historical status or stature of the building. And that is absolutely the case. And I'm not familiar enough to support or deny what you're saying, whether they are or they aren't. But that's what a good lease should control. And if we're looking at a multi-use situation, I think the township, as the landlord, is going to take a very different look at those kinds of leases and be more judicious in the structure of them. So it could be not the use as much as just the nature of the landlord tenant relationship via the lease. I mean, I think that's an element of it. I think that's part of what you're raising. Is there another? There was another comment. At the beginning of the meeting, and it's only because I'm a dinosaur on IT and Zoom issues. I should have introduced our newest stakeholder who's on the call tonight, Emily Hiller. Not to embarrass you, but I want to call it out. Emily came to the meeting on the 26th, and there was a group of neighbors, residents, that were so passionate that it became clear that we wanted to create a new stakeholder, resident ambassadors, and Emily is representing that group of 6 or 7 or 8 now of passionate residents, passionate about Patterson Farm. So, Emily, welcome aboard. I hope you don't regret your volunteering yet.
No. I think, Dennis, we've been watching you since the end of 2021 with the ad hoc meetings, and it's really nice to see the progress. I think sometimes you don't notice, can't tell how many people are watching because it's on a live stream, but there are quite a few people interested. So it's nice to see all the progress.
Good. Well, thank you. Welcome aboard. Great to have you.
Dennis, if I could just add one more thing, and maybe you should comment on it, Jim. There were other comments that, by the way, before I say this, your summary, I think, is excellent. It's great to have it boiled down into your final takeaways, and the way you've organized it, I think, is good. But there were these are mainly from the comment cards, I think, which were pretty representative. I haven't compared these to the online comments, Jim, that you shared with us recently, that have been posted on the townships tab, I guess, on your website. We might, Dennis, when we sort of send our report summary out, and this is in an appendix, if it's not too much to ask, we integrate those comments into this analysis, almost using the same categories, the same filters, but just a suggestion.
No, Doug, it's a good one. And actually, some of those online comments are reflected here. Jim had sent those over and they were incorporated in this report. Not all of them. There was one set that just kind of came in too late, but
yes.
But we did get some of the online comments here in addition as well. So,
Yeah,
but
awesome.
it's a good point. It's a good point. I have to say, a lot of good conversations at that public forum, and the passion. You can see the passion and the concern in people's faces and hear it in their voices. One thing I would say, and I'm not here to defend any particular group, but the number of people that are familiar with Patterson Farm and love it. I mean, and that's their word. I love that farm. That are because there's been the art organization there in recent years. Because I know a number of people in LMT that have no idea what Patterson Farm is, never set foot on it. But there's a whole group of people that have set foot on it because they go to that particular venue, which is really the only public source, and they fall in love with it. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say, I've had the comments. It's like, oh, I love that place. So it says that for better or worse, for whatever, however it came about, giving the public some access to the property is a positive thing. It ties them to the property. That says that the public would be willing to support spending money on it, to support volunteering for it, to support it overall. If it's a mystery and it's locked away and totally off limits to everything, I don't see how the public is ever going to adequately support that property to the magnitude that we know the spending will have to be to save those buildings. It's easy to say, well, just fix them. They're not going to fix buildings and spend millions of dollars to have them sit idle and dark. So we have to find some uses, in my opinion, and having people go on the property is really a synergistic relationship to saving the property. That's my my version of it. Okay, let's if we could, the next agenda item. Are there other comments? Sorry, other comments on the on the forum? Okay. Our next agenda item, FZ Creative has a proposal to the committee, and if the committee supports this proposal, we will take it to the Board of Supervisors at their meeting on the 19th, and to lead that discussion is Ron Schmid. Ron, you want to take that away?
Sure. Thank you, Dennis. Well, basically, we want to build on the success of the first public forum. To state it more succinctly, the objective here is to build a community outreach and engagement for the Patterson Farm Master Plan project. I want to emphasize that through consistent and effective communications. And this basically will be a partnership between the township, the Board of Supervisors, and our committee, AHPC, to drive these communications. So, and I'll try and be succinct about the proposal here. The first part is earned media, and this is similar to what we did for the first public meeting, but the objective is to drive awareness of the all the news coming out of this project through news releases, the LMT website, social media, and a new hub that would be created to house a lot of this information. In effect, there would be 5 news releases. One has already been done, which was for the 6/26 meeting. It's anticipated to have a second news release, which would summarize that first meeting, because we do in fact owe it to our residents to summarize what came out of that first public forum, and then tease the next public meeting so that we can even get a greater attendance at the next meeting. Release 3 is anticipated to really spotlight the development of a new project hub for this project. And it would have corresponding a social media page, and would also talk about the next meeting in September. So we'd be teasing out the next meeting again. Release 4 would summarize the September meeting. And then finally, there'd be a 5th release announcing the final recommendations from the committee. All of these releases, we anticipate putting on the newswire. And the reason for that is, there's a lot of different ways to approach reaching out to media. One is you can just call them. But if you put out a news release on the wire, it lives forever. And when people start looking for information about Patterson Farm or about what Lower Makefield Township is doing with these buildings, they will find it. It comes up higher on your Google searches when you go on the wire. If you don't go on the wire, it kind of gets buried and you don't see it. So that would be the effort at earned media. And then there's the second part, which is to create a hub for the master plan information and do it in conjunction with Zenticity. And more on that in a minute. But Zenticity has provided data to David Kratzner, who's the township manager. And what they've articulated is that currently 93% of the social media on the subject are from unofficial sources. Now, I haven't seen all the data, but that's what was articulated. So this proposal we're asking you to look at here is looking to have a greater say by the property owner in this conversation. Like we had at the first public forum, and we'll build on with these news releases. We want to have a greater say in this conversation and begin to lead some of this conversation. Basically, it would create a hub for the master plan information. It would be a information for the community for all things related to the Patterson Farm Master Plan project. It would also amplify our media relations efforts, meaning the news releases, and capitalize on basically Zencity's functionality. And what they're good at, those are a lot of words there, guys, but what they're good at is they're good at community engagement and getting people to answer questionnaires, getting them engaged through a website. This would be a visual experience filled with relevant information, basically from our project. To give you a little feel for it, it would include some or all of the following: visuals of the property, featured information on the meetings, overview of goals and challenges, opportunities for moving forward, best practices from across the country that we might apply to this, Zencity surveys, engagement and questions to key communities, community interest groups and others, and get feedback from it. And again, video content and news and updates. The second part of this would be social media, because once you have this hub, you want to drive people to the hub. So in the social media page, you would set up a Facebook page. You'd be reaching out to some of the communities, like the Lower Makefield is a good place to live, and several other groups, driving them to both the Lower Makefield Township page and also this new hub to build engagement on the part of all the residents. So you get followers on Facebook, and then you drive them to the hub. So in conclusion, we want to do this with, the project would go from now until the end of the year. FZ would be the agency to do this work for us. They would be continually sharing information about the Patterson Farm Master Plan project, and try and do it in a unique and engaging way for the community. And in the short term, we'd include information about the master plan project, why it exists, what happened at the first meeting, and what to expect next. Total cost would be about $20,000. And so far, the people who have touched this has been both Dennis, myself, and Dennis Kratzner, who's the township manager, who then suggested we bring it to the ad hoc committee for any discussion here. And then if we approve this, take it to the Board of Supervisors next week. Dennis, that's a brief summary of what we'd like to proceed, how we'd like to proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Yeah, and part of the issues here is that with the social media data, with the chatter, the conversations, 93% being unofficial, 7% being from official sources. There's a lot of misinformation there, and if we want to have the facts and deal intelligently with this, we have to have accurate information out there. So in order to assure accurate information, they need to be from more official sources than just the usual kind of chatter that one can find anywhere. Discussions, comment, Joe?
How does our proposal address that? I mean, that's not going to stop the conversations on the Facebook page. It's not going to stop.
Oh, no.
No,
But
The chatter is going to happen. So what are we going to do differently than what we're doing right now?
We're going to do.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, well, we're going to do more of it. We're going to do it uniquely. We're going to be trying to lead the conversation and drive people to various sites to get accurate information, including the hub, which will be an exciting place to go to get information about this project, Facebook page, and then all the social media outlets in each of the communities, and drive all of it together and to the hub to get all this accurate information, which will include, for example, interviews with members of this committee. It can include a discussion of National Registry issues. It can include a whole variety of things that will educate residents about how we are proceeding with this in a professional manner to come to good conclusions about what to do about the buildings on Patterson Farm.
It's part of trying to better inform the public and to reach out. You're right. It won't stop polluted chatter, but it just needs to raise the voice and the volume of the factual chatter.
And how does the hub differ from the page that we have now on the Lower Makefield Township site where we're putting all this information?
It would be in addition, but there would be links back and forth from the hub to the Lower Makefield Township page, but visually more exciting, more interesting, and with more content than you can get on the Lower Makefield Township page.
And I've actually looked at some of the stuff for Zen City, and it really is a nicer platform than our current website that we just started utilizing the program and are undergoing training. I think it'll be a huge benefit for this project and other projects moving forward.
Other questions?
Ron, I see on the proposal that there are also some potentially significant expense costs involved that we should be fully cognizant of and make sure that everyone's aware of.
Yes. Every time you go on the wire, it costs you $700 to $900. It does. The original proposal from FZ was for 15. I built in some fat to the proposal to cover any issues that might come up. And more importantly, the fact that as we move along on this project, the need for more communications might become more urgent as we get to the options and as we get to the recommendations. So I did build in some room here, Fred.
And coming from a public industry standpoint, this is a lump sum contract that I'm not sure how you measure that. Basically, they bill you at a certain date, whether or not you're satisfied with or what exactly they've accomplished. So I have some concerns about how that may be the way that they deal their typical procedure, but from the public standpoint, I'm a little concerned.
Fred, we could certainly talk to them about that, but it's also my understanding, and Jim, you might be able to help me with this. It's my understanding that part of the role of Zencicity in this process would be, in fact, to evaluate the effectiveness of what FC was doing in terms of moving the needle in terms of public interest in this project.
Yeah, the program actually has a really robust system of evaluating how there are interactions on various news outlets, social media outlets for a project. So we could actually measure and gauge how the interactions are going. Are they more being driven to our website? Is there more action? Is it positive? Is it negative? So we could, it's really good at assessing how the engagement is with the public.
I think it's also important to point out, I mean, we're kind of in this zone right now working on this master plan project. Let's keep in mind what a master plan is, right? It's going to go on for years. When let's say in October, we make a recommendation for a grand master plan for this property. That's going to have many phases and steps. It's going to be iterative. To one of the comment cards, someone said under finance, can't we do this in stages? The answer is yes, it'll definitely be done in stages. There'll be an early stage. What is the first things we have to do? Doug mentioned it tonight. Maybe initially there's just some quick stabilization to do. Let's be sure we check these couple things just to initially stabilize. Let's look at utilities. Let's look at driveways. There's some early phase things. Then there'll be after some early successes, there'll be a second stage. There'll be a third stage. This development is not going to happen in 6 months. This is going to take years. So my point is this communications plan about in support of a honest dialogue about Patterson Farm isn't going to end when the recommendations are made for the master plan. We need to inform the public of all through that execution stage. So this is the beginning of a multi-year kind of process, and I think it's getting more intelligent and better at the communications part, which is going to be going on way past just some recommendations. That would be my part of my rationale for why I think stepping up the communications plan is a good idea, because we'll need it on execution phase as well. Here's what's going. Somebody said, you know, they had a live camera on 95 when they were rebuilding it in 2 weeks, and people were tuning into the live camera. You know, let's see what's going on. There's going to be a live, you know, we need, that's extreme, but we're going to need some sort of live camera as the master plan is executed as well for some years. So it's a beginning of a process. Steve?
Yeah, thank you. All of a sudden $20,000 just popped up, and I'm saying, whoa, is it more expense? I would ask that if we do proceed with this, that there's some kind of gauge, similar to what Joe was saying, that we ask them to give us what their deliverables will be to some extent. You know, we're saying, okay, we're going to spend a lot of money, right? A fairly reasonable sum of money, and if we can get something that sounds like it's going to be valuable, then could be worth the effort and could be worth the expense. To the other aspect of, you know, we should probably be building on the success that we had by saying all these people who came to that meeting might be going back and talking to their friends and developing a greater pool of input than what we've seen so far. And if we came back with a double or triple the amount of people at the next meeting, where are we going to have it? Is one aspect. But the other aspect is, you know, we'll have been expanding our public acceptance or public understanding. So just those couple things.
I think on the evaluation side, I agree 1,000% with Fred and what Jim said. The Zen City is going to be the measuring stick. It's the perfect measuring yard. You can tell by day, by minute, by geographic location what is going on and what impact is you know, what FZ is doing, what impact that had. So that's what gives me more confidence, is we do have a yardstick to measure performance. And of course you need some months to do that. You can't do that on a single event. They clearly did a good job on the first public meeting. They were hired on just a one-off, real quick, within a week. They did a press release. They got it on the wire. They helped make that a success. So they have a small, short, but positive track record. They're located right beside Pretty Bird and Yardley. They're local company. So to me, it makes sense. It's going to be up to the supervisors, of course, to justify it. But I think it would be helpful to this overall project.
All right. I didn't understand the background of the previous experience, that they did have something to do with the initial meeting. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Other discussion on the FZ proposal?
And as I just got up on my emails from today, was there a proposal for us to review in the email?
Yeah, Ron, you sent everybody the proposal.
No, I just sent it to the subcommittee yesterday when it got finalized. I did not send it to the entire committee.
I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize. I thought the committee had an opportunity to review that.
I did not.
Okay. What I would suggest then is let's get the proposal to the entire committee, and let's see if we can't kind of take a written vote by email on that.
Okay.
I mean, I would say today I'm a positive vote because I've seen the proposal. Ron's seen the proposal. it's not fair to Joe and Fred who haven't seen it. And I apologize. I thought that was in front of everyone. Okay. Okay. Can we proceed that way?
Fine.
Okay. All right. So the next agenda item is project process and next steps, and that's really Doug and the committee in terms of some early very next steps post tonight. Doug, you're on mute, Doug. If you're maybe Doug's not hearing me.
I'm there. I don't know who muted me in the first place. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Am I hearable?
Nope.
Oh, I can't hear you without headphones. Somebody's got to be funny tonight. So in any event, I think really the next steps are we start diving into suggested use options and start devising preliminary cost sort of values on a structure by structure basis. I'm going to work on a narrative for each building. This is what it takes to get to different levels of use, starting with stabilization, and then probably certain buildings will have different uses per the floor areas that are usable. For instance, third floors and basements of the houses aren't usable. Second floors of some of the barns, the equipment barn and the small barn, require so much work to make usable other than light storage. It doesn't take much to talk about those uses. But I think it's get uses in front. I'd like to have a working session with the ad hoc committee so that at the next meeting, it'll be as full as this one, discussing and putting in front of everybody with a document ahead of time so you can come prepared on suggested uses on buildings, and also digging into the easement uses and the trail aspects and the road circulation and how that relates to some of the things that there have been sidebar conversations with Jim and Sam and others on how this will relate to the site. Is that what you're looking to hear, Dennis?
Yeah, I think
I don't know much more than that.
Okay. Yeah, drive into the used options. I know Todd Poole is going to be delivering shortly. I know he's working on the revenue side
Yes.
of any given use. What would market rate be for an art center? What would market rate be for if it's a distillery or what? All the various uses in order to get the kind of the revenue side. Your costing experts are going to be working on the cost side per use, and the easements. We do need to discuss. There's been a lot of dialogue on the flexibility or lack of flexibility on the agricultural easements that are on the 196 acres. If there's any latitude to adjust 5 acres here and 10 acres there to actually grow the easement, it looks like that's going to be very limited opportunity, but we have to get to the bottom of that. And just to say it out loud, I mean, if the easement type of restrictions through Bucks County seem very brittle, very rigid. There's even a question if we would be allowed to put a walking trail in the easement area, which would be a major disappointment given the desire for that access. So that there's a lot of that to be sorted out. Much of that is with Jim and the township and the lawyers, but we need to do that. I should also say we're going to be going to the public comment period very shortly. So if people want to, if listeners want to call in to and make comments, please begin that process so that if there's a delay, when we call for your comments, hopefully you've had a chance to connect. Does the committee have any other business? Is there anything we've left off the agenda or an item that needs to be brought up at this time? Fred.
Well, I think the key item is pinning down at least a couple dates for the second meetings. You know, especially if we're going to have some media in preparation for that. We need location, we need to get the notices out and so on. So I think both on us and the township and Doug's team to start pinning down exactly when we're going to have this second meeting so that we can start planning for it.
The general schedule kind of targets the very end of August, the very beginning of September. August just scares me, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, who's here in August? So tentatively, we're kind of targeting early September, but I think we want to see the whites of the eyes of the work being done before we can, kind of put a stake in the ground on the date, because we don't want to set a date prematurely and then find out that the architectural team needs 6 more days or something. But I agree with you. We need to pin that down. And would it be reasonable, Doug, to say that by the end of July, we should be able to pick a date for early September? You will have confidence in what you could deliver.
Yeah, I would think so. On the second page of what you all saw tonight, it's in the previous ad hoc meeting agenda, but what I have here is ad hoc 6, just if you want to write some dates down, is August 10th. That's when I see presenting in this forum reuse options on a building by building basis, farmstead by farmstead, where it's really, like you said, Dennis, Todd and I are doing it together primarily, with Bill and others sort of advising on the sides, but it's the two of us are the most of the consultant work, costs and revenue, physical opportunities and what makes sense from a market point of view, with options per building to be discussed. So that's August 10th. Then our next ad hoc 7, which is November 14th, if it continues, is the second Thursday, I guess they are. That's when we were going September. I'm sorry, Fred. You always catch me. So it's September 14th. That's when we see that we're starting to present draft recommendations. We had talked about at the last ad hoc that the public meeting is after we have options and they're vetted through this committee, sometime before we actually make recommendations, we query the public again to say, hey, public, here's options, here's thoughts, give us your feedback. Then we take those and put them into preliminary recommendations. That strikes me as a tight schedule, but I am expecting steady work through then, so it's not impossible. And then the ad hoc 8 is October 12th, which is to discuss these preliminary recommendations with this committee and start to develop a draft report for the final public forum, which is at a supervisors meeting sometime late October. So I think certainly we're in September for this public forum. The question is it only after we have options, or do we do options through this forum and through working group sessions? And when we go to the public, we kind of have an A and a B scheme and share with them options that were considered, but don't just go there with no plan and just say, we could do this, we could do that. My instinct's to have some guidance from this group through maybe even 2 ad hoc meetings. So What I'm visualizing, Fred, is we have a working session and drill in detail, like you said, and choose that date sometime by the end of this month. I'd
Yeah,
like to have a working session this month, Dennis, is what I'd like to have.
right. So by August 10th, we'll be looking at some options. We need to have a second public forum, basically right after, pretty much after the 10th, or that puts us in late August, but we need time. It's between the 10th and August 10th and September 14th, but we need a little bit of distance from both of those dates. So
my instinct is to maybe put it just before the September 14th meeting, like almost the week before, where we review at the September ad hoc what the public said. In other words, I go there with, here's what Todd and I are saying, options with sort of a preferred scheme or a logical scheme that was vetted through this group in August, vetted through the public, and then we share comments with this group on the 14th. And then hopefully at that meeting, whether it's show of hands or soon thereafter, let's start running with option A, B, or C.
mhm.
I kind of think we should give us time to prepare for the public. My instinct tells me September is better than August.
Right.
And if I were to just choose a date without looking at a calendar, it would be September 7th, something like that.
Right.
I would
Okay.
agree with Doug that, at least from the feedback that I heard about the meeting, the public wants something substantive from us with regards to what are the possible uses for this. For them to choose.
Well, maybe that's an argument for what I just said, Joe, is that we say we have an A and we have a B, and here's the things we looked at as a process, but here's where this process is starting to point.
Yeah. No, and we have to have that in early September. And with that, we can also have a vision of what some of the early steps might be.
Yeah, oh, I think so. Yeah.
The phase one steps has to be a part of that, because the township budgeting process for 2024 is starting in September. And if we can kind of give a little bit of not final decisions, but a little heads up on, here are the kinds of things that might be in the near term, in terms of magnitude, that might help that process. We don't want to come in after the budget is baked and everything's set back. So
Yeah.
I think early September makes sense, but I don't feel comfortable actually pinning down a date tonight. But I thought the location was good. The community center, I thought, worked well. It had a good capacity. We could put some more people in there. We couldn't put twice as many, but we could maybe organize it a bit differently. I thought that was the right location. So, Jim, just keep that in mind as you're looking ahead at the township calendars.
Oh, absolutely. And depending on the format of the meeting, if the next meeting is going to be purely presentational, we could always try to televise it. And that way you could have people in person and also via Zoom and YouTube and Facebook and even television, be able to see the proceedings.
I think it's a good point. It'll probably be a screen share approach because there'll be information to show. So that would lend itself to that. Whereas the last one was really an informal discussion with 120 people.
Right. Okay.
By design, more casual.
Right. Other discussion before we turn it over for public comment?
Just one housekeeping item. We passed over the minutes. We need to formally approve so they can be posted.
You're right. The The minutes have been reviewed. I know they were circulated to the full committee, the meetings from June 8th. Have the committee members had a chance to review those minutes? And if so, is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, thank you. All in favor of approving the June 8th minutes as circulated, say aye.
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 Okay, very good. Thank you, Fred. I really appreciate that. Okay, Jonathan, are there public comments in the people in the waiting room to make comments?
We have Donna on the line for public comment, bringing Donna in now.
Thank you.
Donna, you are now
Hi,
in the
can
room.
everyone- Hi, it's Donna Doan. Do you need my address?
Yes, please.
2814 Langhorne Yardley Road, Langhorne.
Thank you.
Just wanted to applaud the efforts of the committee tonight as far as the National Register nomination goes. We have waited so long for this, and I'd really like to see that move ahead as quickly as possible. So good job on that. I did want to bring some additional information to the committee, and that is the referendum that was put before the voters in 1998 to finance the acquisition of the farm. I'll send you that, Dennis. I got it today from the Bucks County Elections Committee. The language was very specific to preservation and thwarting development, so that should be an interesting document for the committee to review. Also wanted to just reiterate the farm is in the agricultural security area and it is under Act 319. So when you discuss those acres that are not yet preserved with a conservation easement, just be aware, to my knowledge, it's all still in Act 319. It was when Tom Patterson owned the farm. So it's clean and green, and that may have some effect as to the decisions that you make moving forward. Also, in regard to the history, I wanted to make sure that the Thomas Janney connection is mentioned and put forth in that National Register nomination, because Thomas Janney really hasn't had too much discussion among this committee. And of course, he was one of William Penn's provincial council members, so we don't want to forget him. Also, in regard to the acquisition of the farm, at the time it was acquired by the township, there was a fee assessed. It was a nominal fee per household. So as far as I know, that may still be collected. The committee may want to look into that, because if that's the case, then there could be quite a lot of money that is earmarked for the preservation or upkeep of Patterson Farm that the committee is not aware of. So please look into that. Also wanted to mention specifically a fair rental agreement should be arrived upon with the help of the Historic Commission. I know it was mentioned earlier, Steve brought up about the leases and so forth. Now's the time to look at all of that. I think there should be some tenant selection criteria that is public. It should be drawn up, a formal agreement, a formal document that says this is what we're looking for as far as tenants, so that everyone can understand, exactly how those buildings are rented and so on. And as we approach the 350-year anniversary of the Patterson Farm, I really think this discussion must include the preservation of a place for a farmer to live. It is unrealistic to think that farming can continue if this committee or a former supervisors or a future supervisors board believes that a farmer will move into the township and buy a $750,000 house or up and farm Patterson Farm. If we want to preserve agriculture, we have to also preserve a place for a farmer to live. Satterthwaite House would be the perfect place to do that because it's double house. You can have the farmer on one side. You could have the Patterson Ag and Heritage Center on the other side, and it would work. It just for a farm to be unoccupied at night, especially, it's not a good thing. It's a historic property. There really should be someone on site. You could either have the farmer live there, or in the event that the farmer doesn't opt to fill an apartment or part of that house, you have security person, that would perhaps be just a resident caretaker to watch over the property, make sure it's secure at nighttime and so on. And I think it's an interesting conversation that you have about spending $20,000 for PR. I'd certainly like to see the township spend a portion of that amount and promote agriculture within the community. We have a farm of statewide importance. It has the heritage akin to Bartram's Garden, and yet we have crickets from the township as far as promoting agriculture in the community. So, and that perhaps is why a lot of people don't know Patterson Farm. As Dennis said, it's astounding to me that, we've owned this farm for 25 years and people don't really know where it is or what goes on. They're surprised when they hear that vegetables are grown there. I noticed some of the comments said, what if we have a CSA? We have a CSA. It's a successful CSA. So we do have that and we should promote it. And we have 7,500 signatures on a petition for preservation. And I don't know if the Zin City promotion of that meeting helped to boost it, but we got about 1,500 more signatures on the petition the week of the meeting. So, there's that. Anyway, so good progress made. Thank you all. And Dennis, I will send you over the verbiage from the referendum from 1998. You can share that with the committee and take it from there. Thanks all. Good evening.
Thank you. Other callers?
No further public comment.
Okay. Hopefully that anybody who wants to call in has had the opportunity to. I know people are tuning in, but that doesn't necessarily mean you want to call in. It's 9:41. We started this meeting at 7:30. I genuinely appreciate this committee and our extended committee of stakeholders and consultants that for their energy effort. It's not just during these 2-hour evening Zoom calls. It's a lot of conversations and emails every day of the week. So I want to express my appreciation to all of you on the screen, and certainly anybody that's listening. It is an important resource. It is an important farm. There's a tremendous production. There are 14 crops grown on Patterson Farm as we speak. It includes not only field corn and soybeans, which most of us see from the road. It's sweet corn, 60,000 dozen typically in a year grown there. It's tomatoes, both cherry tomatoes, plum tomatoes, slicing tomatoes, and heirloom tomatoes. Pumpkins of all kinds, cantaloupe, eggplant, peppers, zucchini. They're all feeding our community. They're all available at Charland Farms and some of their other outlets. So it is a very active and very productive farm. It's one of the challenges that we have to make it accessible to the public, because when the tomatoes have to be harvested right at sunrise on Tuesday, we can't wait for the public to get out of the way or for the public to come and help on Saturday at noon. So it is an active farm. There is tension there, but I do believe there's compatibility with some public uses, and all of this production is going on as we speak, and it's going on without the farmers using any buildings. We just have to make that point. I know there's a lot of arguments that all the buildings should be devoted to farming. They're not today, and it's more productive probably than it's ever been. There's never been, in the history, 20,000 bushels of corn harvested off of that farm like there was last year. So it's productive. If the farmer could use a couple buildings, that would be wonderful. Right now, they're really not. So we have to figure out how to save these buildings, and that's the thrust of this case. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, it's just one quick thing. I don't want to, I'm not going to correct everything that's been said. That's, probably not so accurate, but if anyone's leaving the call thinking that Lower Makefield Township has a CSA, the township's not running a CSA. The Great Farmer on Charlotte is running a CSA, and people should reach out to them and be a part of it. But, we have to be careful when we start crossing the line where it sounds like township is promoting a business or taking sides in some stuff, because that's not what we're really supposed to be doing. So.
And it's also the case that the township is not an agricultural producer. And I've seen reports of a lot of government money available to help preserve farmland. They're for agricultural producers. They're for Indian tribes. They're not for landlords or who are municipalities. It's just not the case. So it's the difference between an idea that's up here and a plan that tethers that idea to the ground, and that tethering has to be accurate. And it's one of the reasons why I think we need to be sure that accurate information is sent out to the community in a reliable way. And one of the reasons why we want this FC proposal. So I will follow up with the committee via email after you've had a chance to review that, and we'll take it from there. But thank you, Suzanne. That's very appropriate comment.
Thank you guys. And well, now that we have Emily, thank you all for everything that you do, because it's really, it's, as you said, Dennis, it's not just these calls, it's all the work that you guys are volunteering to do, and it's really appreciated. So forward we go.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn. I see some fingers for second. All in favor? Good night, everybody.
Hey.
Thank you.